I just want to welcome everyone and say we're going to wait approximately another minute or two because people are still steadily coming in. And then we'll begin. I can already see that somebody has raised their hand. We're going to be giving the presentations and discussion. If you could remember to put your questions as they arise in the Q&A box, we'll get to them. Or I think the chat will also work for everyone. Feel free to use both, but if you have a question for one of the speakers as this goes forward, please do put it in the Q&A because we'll know that it is something you'd like answered during the time. Good. So let me begin because we'll start and with a few introductory remarks, and I'm sure people will be coming in as we unfold the few slides in advance of the conference. Welcome to everyone. This is the second of a series of conferences and webinars termed Advancing International Pediatric Clinical Research. My name is Barbara Beerer. I'm a professor of medicine and pediatrics at Harvard Medical School and the Brigham and Women's Hospital. And I'm really delighted to welcome you and this wonderful group that we have before you. So could I have the next slide? Just wanted everyone to appreciate that the MRCT Center is a research and policy center at Harvard and the Brigham and Women's Hospital, really dedicated to improving the safety, integrity, and rigor of international multi-site clinical trials. And we do that work by bringing together diverse stakeholders, individuals from pharma, CROs, academia, patient advocates, regulatory personnel, journal editors, and as you'll hear today, young people, to define the emerging issues in global clinical trials. And we're not really happy with just defining the problem. What we do is then work together as a multiple stakeholder community to define practical solutions to those problems that are actionable, based in ethics and regulation, that allow us to then try to make progress on solving some of those challenges. I want to say that the MRCT Center is supported by grants and by contributions, but we are independent and as an academic center responsible for our own positions and work, and none of us have conflicts of interest that we need to disclose. Could I have the next slide? So one of the projects we've been working on, which of course is a long-term effort for all of us, is to really think about the challenges in doing research in children and for children, and importantly with children. We started this really when we realized that we thought, make real progress in thinking about how we conduct clinical trials with children. And on the basis of believing, as you all do on this call, that children deserve access to safe and effective medicines. And in order to do that, they have to participate in trials and the collection of data around the safety and efficacy of medicines. But unfortunately, historically, children have been excluded from or underrepresented in research, which means that if you don't have the data and you don't know something safe and effective, every child who gets a medicine is their own experiment, which puts the population and the individual child at risk. The pediatric population is defined often by rare diseases and is geographically diverse. So we really need to find common approaches to the way we do these trials. There have been persistent ethical issues and challenges in trial initiation and conduct. Importantly, we've heard that the pediatric patient and family voice is not routinely solicited nor included in the research life cycle. Children are routinely not offered a seat at the table, although, as you'll hear today, they have a lot to say to us as the rest of the community. Could I have the next slide, please? So our project objectives were really to identify and propose solutions to the regulatory, ethical, and operational challenges, thinking about pediatric research governance, focusing on legislative, regulatory, and guidance gaps and inconsistencies. You'll hear about some of those in another 2 webinars. Identify the current initiatives to improve pediatric research globally so that we're supporting, not really reinventing a wheel. Identify those challenges related to decision-making by and on behalf of children, address the benefit and risk considerations that create barriers and inefficiencies in transnational research with children, and then really finding meaningful ways to engage the patients, their families, and communities. And that is the last is what we're focusing on today. We did this work as a group of about 80 members from across the geographies. Everything we do is global in nature, as you'll hear today, with representatives from around the world, and included diverse leadership. Most challenging, of course, was to get children or young people involved in real time. So we often did this work remotely with them. Next slide, please. So today we're going to be hosting these webinars on advancing international pediatric clinical research. This is funded in part through an FDA scientific conference grant award, for which we're appreciative. There are 5 virtual webinars. Each session is hosted twice, once in the morning in the US or the East Coast, and once in the very late evening, so that we can really respect the time across the globe and get and invite people across the world to participate. The content is the same, as you'll see the questions we raise, the way that we're trying to uncover the answers or approaches to those questions, but the speakers are different, the perspectives are different, and feel free to contribute and join each. The content will differ. Could I have the next slide? The first session we hosted was last October, Informing the Future from COVID-19 Lessons Learned in Pediatric Research. The webinars are posted and we will be sending you a link to where those are posted. Today, we're talking about hearing from young people in clinical research. And next, in this June, we're going to be talking about decision-making at ethics committee level. and then in the fall, regulatory convergence to facilitate international cooperation. If you'd like to be included in information, please sign up at the MRCT Center. We will be posting information about this, and we will also have it in our newsletters. I'm not going to waste a lot of time in giving these extended introductions to the speakers and panelists. They're amazing people and contributors, as you'll hear, but rather we've prepared what we call a bio book so that you'll have the information at your fingertips and can refer to it later. That is also on the website. So with that, let me ask for the next slide. We are going to be giving two videos today out of respect for the fact that young people actually go to school and are at home and play, and the timing is different. This one was really produced in collaboration with the International Children's Advisory Network, which we call ICANN, who have been absolutely wonderful partners with us in putting together this series. Could you show the slide, please? The video, thank you. I went into building these.
My name is Megan. I'm 11 years old and I am from the United States of America.
My name is Vicky Edith. I'm 20 years old. I'm from Uganda.
So hi, I'm Nora. I'm 18 years old and I'm from Barcelona, Spain.
My name is Wycliffe. I'm 16. I'm from Uganda.
Have you been involved in medical care and healthcare?
Yeah, I think I've pretty much been involved in medicine and healthcare since I was young.
Yes, I have.
Yes.
Yes, I'm a patient, but also a young advisor at San Juan de Deu Children's Hospital, and currently I am in my first year of the biomedicine degree.
Tell us something about your experiences receiving medical care and healthcare.
I think my experience with medicine's been good. My doctors have explained to me what kind of medicines I'm taking, how I need to take them, and so on. I know what changes could be made to the meds and what they could mean. I know that there have been several times where I've been really interested in learning more about medicine, so I would look into things, and then when I'd go to the doctor's office, I would talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, and then maybe the doctors would argue with me, and then I'd argue back, and they'd say I should be a lawyer when I grow up.
During my vacation of senior 6, I went to a certain clinic and helped the nurse with cleaning people's wounds and taking their temperatures.
I wish my doctor should understand that I want clinical research. Decision makers should know the effects involved in clinical trials.
So I was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy at 18 months old, so I started listening medic words since I was so little, because in my hospital, San Juan de Deu, doctors try to make us understand as better as possible our disease and our condition. For the young people that we born with a congenital disease, medicine, healthcare, doctors, treatment, side effects are familiar words. And the hospital is our second house. Like every year I can have an average of 1 per month visits at hospital. So,
Have you been involved in clinical trials or research of any kind?
I've already been a part of a clinical trial before, sort of. When I was very young, I was placed into an ongoing clinical trial that wasn't in a research center, and I didn't know about it. I think I was around maybe 2 years old. And if I did know about it, I don't remember, of course, because I was 2 years old. And no harm was done or anything, and I trust that the clinical trial was used to the benefit of others. I don't really know what it was for, something about kidney function, I think. I don't really know much about it, but I hope that it was used to the benefit of others.
Yes, researchers should know that young people need proper handling and care.
Yes, I have. I wish my doctors could have asked me whether I wanted to become one of the medical researchers. For young people, there need to be clear collection of information from the patient in order to get clear information from the patient.
So I'm so lucky to be in one nowadays, and it is a very beautiful and rewarding experience for me. I'm participating in this clinical trial from 5 years ago now, I think. In my personal experience, I didn't feel that my doctors were missing something to ask me. They all have care about everything that happens to me, and not only about the disease, they have care about our mental health, which is something I'm so grateful for, because sometimes we forget this part of a disease. It is probably one of the most important red flags in a life of a person who have a disease like mine, a person who will have the disease forever.
Why do you think researchers should ask kids about clinical trials?
I think it's important to know that people, and well, all people, but especially young people, when they walk into the place where they're going to do the clinical trial, they don't know all the facts. They probably didn't just Google it and say, hey, what's going to happen to me, and then read the whole Wikipedia page about it. I think that it's very important for young people like me to share their ideas because we want to know. And I think that one of the most important ways to stand up for the world is to stand up for yourself first.
I think researchers should ask kids whether they are involved in becoming medical researchers too.
I think researchers should ask kids about clinical trials in order to get clear information.
In my opinion, I think that they should ask groups like kids or patients, organizations, because we are children, we have an opinion. We can help researchers to really perform patient-centric projects. The only way to do it is involving us as partners of their projects. And our motto is nothing for the patients without the patient.
Well, thank you so much. It was well worth the wait, as was said in the chat. And it was just wonderful to hear the voices directly from children asking to be heard and listened to and to be asked. And I want to thank ICANN again, and then invite Jennifer Preston, our keynote speaker from the University of Liverpool, England. Jenny will speak to us, and we will hear from her youth guest speaker, Sophie Ainsworth, who has started a nonprofit raising awareness of invisible illness in schools and education raise. So with that, let me turn it over to Jenny, and thank you so much for participating today.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you to the team for inviting me to speak today. And it's great to be with everybody today. I actually loved that video. I loved Wycliffe's choice of football club. As you can tell, I'm from Liverpool and an avid supporter of Liverpool Football Club, so that's great to see. Again, like I say, thank you for inviting me today. I'm going to talk about a big passion of mine. I've been working in the involvement of children and young people in clinical design and conduct for the last 17 years at the University of Liverpool. And it's a great passion of mine in terms of taking the time to listen to children and young people in clinical research. So my talk is entitled Agents of Change. So it's not just about listening to children, it's about acting on the views of children and young people. And this is commonly referred to as child participation, which is embodied in Article 12 of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child, which applies to all children capable of forming a view. So just to clarify, I'm not talking about participating in clinical research as participants of the research. I'm talking about the active partners in the research process, which was mentioned in some of Barbara's slides. But first of all, let's hear Sophie's story. And unfortunately, as Barbara mentioned, Sophie can't be with us today because of work commitments, but hopefully you will enjoy listening to Sophie's journey. So video, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophie and I'm a patient research advocate, as well as the founder of RAISE, a young person-led charity which supports young people with invisible illnesses in their education. I was introduced to the world of research when I was 14. I'd been struggling for several months with severe joint pain, muscle weakness, sickness, breathing problems, hair loss and more, and I was struggling to get answers. In the early days, I was dismissed by a couple of doctors and didn't really feel listened to. Eventually, I was referred to the wonderful Alderhay Children's Hospital here in Liverpool, who diagnosed me with lupus. After I was diagnosed, I was quickly asked if I wanted to be involved in a study that they were running. Despite all the fears that were surrounding a new diagnosis, when I was asked to participate in this lupus research, it was a no-brainer. Obviously, I wanted to help my doctors learn more about this disease that had been making me so unwell. From the offset, my experience with research was really positive. The team explained exactly what I would be doing. In my case, they just wanted to take some extra blood samples during my routine tests. And then about a year later, what I thought was a really great part of this research experience is they invited me, along with some of the other patients on the study, to an event where we got to hear all about the research we were a part of. We were hearing firsthand from my doctors, who I would usually see in clinic, about the impact of my participation in this research and all the exciting work that they were doing to help patients like me. And this experience really made my input to the research feel really valuable. And it was great to see what was going on in the world of lupus. It was also through this event that I learned the benefits of meeting other patients through research, which for me has been a big part of research involvement. The other patients I met that day were the first people that I had met with lupus, and they remain my friends now. I found one of the unexpected benefits of being involved in the patient research community has been being surrounded by other people who do understand what it's like to have a condition like mine. Over the next few years, I became more and more involved in promoting patient involvement in research and shared my experiences as a young patient with doctors and researchers. Then with the support of doctors and patient research groups, I felt more empowered to share my opinions on research which was going on in the field, and more importantly felt like I was actually being listened to. I believe one of the most important things to ensure a positive involvement in research is a good relationship with your doctors, and this is definitely something that helped me. And it was this that was really pivotal when I was starting my charity Raise in 2015. I think an important thing to remember for clinicians is to take into account a patient's life away from the hospital. Often focus is placed on blood tests and numbers, but it's important to consider the practicalities of how a condition impacts a patient's life every day. For me, one of the biggest stresses was school. Since my diagnosis, I'd struggled to get the understanding that I needed and the support from my teachers. Luckily, I had fantastic support from my hospital and particularly from my specialist nurse, but I wanted to do more. I began to think about why my teachers didn't understand and realised that it was likely due to my illness being invisible. While I felt really unwell, I looked no different to my healthy peers, and maybe that made it difficult for them to understand. I realised that I would probably not be the only person experiencing this, and so I started to think about what I could do about it to ensure that other young people didn't go through the same. I had a few ideas, but it all came together when my hospital team came to support me. I mentioned a few ideas that I'd been floating around to my consultant at the end of my next appointment after we'd talked about all my medical updates. I was just chatting through some thoughts I'd had. Instantly, my consultant was enthusiastic and really wanted to help me make some real change. So she set up a meeting with the hospital's PPI manager, who is none other than Preston, who I'm presenting with today. We first met almost 7 years ago, and clearly we're still working together now. And Jen is also now a trustee of Raise, and that just shows what a close relationship the hospital team were keen to build with me when I first came with these ideas. From the offset, I wanted to ensure that Raise was unique in one particular way. It needed to be created by young patients for young patients, and that is what we've continued to do over the years. With the help of Jen and my team at the hospital, I was able to host workshops within the hospital with young people of all ages and with a variety of conditions. In those first meetings, our objective was quite simple. It was to give young people the space and the opportunity to talk about the issues which impacted them so that we could come up with solutions. This was long before Raise was a registered charity, but this ethos has stayed the same. Since then, we've created education resource packs for teachers, entirely written by young people, focusing on their priorities. We've spoken in Parliament and at countless medical conferences across the world, constantly on a mission to raise the voices of young people with invisible illnesses to be empowered to speak up about their health and education. I believe RAISE is a positive example of patient-led research and that lessons can be learned in how researchers and doctors can support it. The encouragement I received from my doctor when I first arrived with an idea to the help in facilitating our work from Jen has allowed RAISE to grow into what it has become, giving me the skills to run the organisation, constantly opportunities to learn while maintaining mine and other young people's vision for the project. We've continued to operate with these values, and all our work as a charity is directly led by young people. And it goes to show that young people should not only be involved in research, but designing it. After all, young patients have their condition every single day. They're the ones living with it. They're the ones with the experiences that need to inform this work. And they soon become experts in their own condition. So therefore, their priorities must be taken into account. To find out more about RAISE, you can visit raise.co.uk or follow us on social media, RAISE UK, and it's spelled with 2 I's for invisible illness. Thank you so much for listening. It's been great. Thanks. Hi everyone,
next
my
slide.
name is Sophie and
So what Sophie's story captures is her journey from diagnosis with a lifelong condition to one of empowerment through involvement in research and advocacy to help other children and young people living with invisible illnesses. And this photograph here is unfortunately a picture of me with me in it, but Sophie obviously is our chief executive officer of the charity, and these are the rest of the trustees, and as you can see, not all of them are young people, but it was driven by Sophie. She was 14 at the time when she approached me to do this work, and she was such a passionate young person about trying to help other young people not have to deal with what she was dealing with in school, because she went from an A-star student, and she still is an A-star student, or was when she was in school, and having 100% attendance. But obviously all of a sudden this condition came along and totally disrupted her way of life, and the school actually didn't understand that, because she looked so healthy at times. So Sophie, came to me and asked, could I help? And that's all I've done ever since, is just help Sophie in her journey. She had a purpose to follow. She wanted to help other young people. And I think advocacy and getting involved in research and her experience helped her to do that. So I believe Sophie is a true agent of change, because she realised something wasn't right, and she needed to change that, but not just for herself, but for other young people. And those resources that she mentioned were developed by her, by other young people, by teachers, by researchers, by healthcare professionals, by parents. So when they are launched, I think COVID-19 stopped the launch of those education resources. They will be launched this year for everyone to use across the globe and adapt as they see fit. So Sophie's story is quite inspirational. It's an example of a young person-led project. She had the vision to get everyone together in the room. I just help facilitate that, because that's my role, and I'm passionate about giving young people the stage to do that. So the educational resources that will be shared are, to help, young people deal with maybe a recent diagnosis, mental health issues, issues of struggling with school and attendance and so on, so that teachers understand and researchers understand where young people are at in their lives. So it's not just about getting them involved in research and not understanding the bigger picture. It's really important to get to understand who that young person is and how it's affecting them in their daily life. So like I said, Sophie had a clear purpose. So next slide, please. So for participation to work, it has to have a purpose. A term used by Professor Laura Lundy from Queen's University in Belfast. And her stance is that participation must lead to outcomes and change. So in the context of clinical research, participation must be truly driven by the idea that this will have some impact on the study design, which ultimately will have an impact on how children and families experience research that they want to participate in. However, unfortunately, and as mentioned in Barbara's slides, we still see study designs that have not actively sought the views of children and young people or listened to those affected by the disease or topic being researched. This often leads to studies that fail to recruit or retain patients because studies may be too challenging or impractical for children and families to participate in. So how can we implement a child's right to be heard? So next slide, please. So Professor Laura Lundy developed what she calls the Lundy model, and it's for practitioners that includes 4 concepts relevant to the realization of the right to listen to children's views. And these include space, voice, audience, and influence. So the model is really helpful to both plan and evaluate child participation. So let me talk a little bit more about each concept and its relevance to clinical research, and also to bring in some of the comments from the young people that you'll hear from today, or you've heard from today. So the model starts with creating a safe and inclusive space for children to express their views, which is self-explanatory and is highlighted in the quotes we see here from young people. So when they're invited to participate in the design and conduct of clinical research, they want researchers to speak to them in a friendly and child-friendly and an age-appropriate manner. Body language is really important, and as is the environment, which helps build their confidence as a child. So the space should be actively created. It's not enough to wait until children express a view or approach a decision maker. That's not going to happen. You're not going to get the likes of Sophie coming to you on a regular basis to set up projects, to lead on. The expectation is for researchers to actually go out to children and young people and seek their views. So we have to involve them right the way throughout the research process, and we have to do that in ways that children feel comfortable and safe to express themselves freely. So the space should be inclusive. So steps should be taken to ensure that children can take part. So younger children, for example, children with disabilities, children who do not speak the official language. Again, it's self-explanatory, but often these groups are overlooked because they are deemed too difficult to reach. And that's not often the case. It's because the resources and time haven't been put to actually go out and reach out to those groups, or have the skills to do that, which can be overcome. So one of the biggest things I've found in my experience is it's really important not to expect children, young people and families to join meetings or forums held in academic or health institutions, or expect young people and everybody to come to us all the time. We have to go out to those community groups. We have to go out to youth groups. We have to put time in to make and build the relationships with children and families to lessen maybe the perceived power imbalances between researchers and community groups. So reaching out to those groups will help overcome some of the barriers that we all face in trying to include a wider variety of young people who otherwise might not take part in such activities. And I think ultimately raises the profile and increases awareness about clinical research if we put the effort in to go out and raise awareness and teach our young people about clinical research and their role that they can play in that. So next slide, please. So voice is the next concept that Laura uses in her model. And that means to provide information and support the expression of views. And you'll hear through today's webinar and maybe the second webinar, you know, children and young people like it when they use visual information, you know, like videos, to help them understand both medical procedures and the research process, but also it helps them understand where their rights are and how they can input into the design and conduct of research if they truly understand the information that they're given. You know, to express themselves, they really need to feel, you know, that they're confident enough that they can express themselves and they don't feel scared or appear stupid if they say something stupid. And one way to overcome some of these issues is to, you know, produce, you know, advice and guidance for and guidelines for young people on you know, how to express their views and how researchers should listen to those views. And children should be given opportunities and choice to communicate their views, whether that be through voice, through, you know, written word, or through drawing and so on. So they should be given a wide range of options to choose from. So next slide. Now, I think this is a really crucial step in the process, is about the audience and, you know, is there a process of communicating children's views? So what they're telling us, how do we communicate that to people who are making the decisions? Do children know that their views are being communicated to and who they're being communicated to? And does that person who we're communicating to have the power to make decisions? So it's actually pointless if we take the time and effort to listen to our young people if we haven't got an audience to have those views heard. And the next slide, please. And if we get the first three concepts right and create that environment and audience and communications, hopefully then that young people will have more of an influence on the decisions being made. And so, you know, the decision makers are making a commitment to giving children's views due weight. And again, you'll hear some comments in maybe the next video that we're going to share in the webinar, is that young people are not stupid. They realise and they'll recognise the difference between when people say they're listening but they actually aren't. And we've all maybe been in situations where that's happened, but young people in particular know when it's absolutely pointless if they're not going to be heard or have any influence on the decisions. And that actually puts young people off taking part in all types of decisions in their lives, not just in clinical research. So we really need to take young people's opinions and incorporate them into our research processes or our programs. And if we don't, then what's the point? So next slide, please. So in summary, if we truly want to listen to and act on young people's views in clinical research, adapting the Lundy model, for example, and it's just one model that I'm just talking about today, but it's a model that I really like if we're going to really conceptualize Article 12 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, because its key concepts as a way to encourage an environment where children and young people become true agents of change in this field. It's not just about listening to children, it's about acting on their views. And participation has to have purpose. If not, we need to question why we're doing it in the first place. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And as you can hear in her speech, her talk, as well as in Sophie's really wonderful direction and clarity, how much we've learned from you both, and how much you've been an advisor to us throughout this. There's one quick question. Do you have specialized centers or courses for the patients that you recommend? How do you think about educating the patients? Obviously, the people we're hearing from have really had uh, uh, great exposure to sort of the best engagement.
So I specifically never talked about today about the young person's advisory group model or the models that we've created in creating spaces, I suppose, for young people to get involved. And with those young people's advisory groups, because I know my good colleague Begonia who's going to be talking soon, we'll talk about that and that infrastructure for that and education. But I think for me, our experience over the years is that we didn't have a systematic way to, or a standardized curriculum, if you want to call it that, to teach young people about clinical research. It was done on an ad hoc basis where, you know, researchers come to our meetings and we teach young people as we go along. But Begonia might touch on some work that we've been doing over the last 2 years in co-creating education for children and young people, for all children and young people, not just involved in young persons advisory groups. And I'm sure people on the call like Amy from ICANN can possibly send links to the curriculum that they've developed through ICANN. So yeah, in short, it wasn't a standardized curriculum, but we are getting to a point where young people can cherry pick resources that suit their needs, because not always, you know, not all young people want to, you know, take part in that education, if that makes sense.
Sure. So it just for time's sake, can you stay on so we can take questions at the end as well?
Yeah, sure.
In case anything arises. That's terrific. Thank you so much again. And while Jen sets up the next video, we had really wanted to have a panel with young people and sort of and respondents. But given school, given the challenges of sort of creating both the scheduled time for this webinar, as well as fitting into children's lives, we recorded a video to which the speakers after the video will respond. And then I want you to know that we are going to show the response to the kids and let them respond and again. This work was done by Gigi McMillan, who's just an amazing colleague, and we all have to thank her for this work, as well as Lisa. So Jen, if you could play this video, you'll recognize one of
The
our...
MRCT Center presents Time to Listen, hearing from young people in clinical research. We asked some children about their experience in clinical research. Their answers will help strengthen your partnership with pediatric participants.
I'm Jan, and I'm 16 years old, almost 17. I'm from Barcelona in Spain.
Ma'am, my name is Sandhya, and I am 18 years old, and I'm from India.
My name is Megan. I'm 11 years old, and I'm from the United States of America. And I think that adults can learn a thing or two from kids.
What is it like when a doctor or researcher talks to you?
I really don't like it when they talk to the adult, but they don't talk to me, because it's as if they think that my opinion doesn't matter.
मैम ऐसा लगता है कि मैम जब बीमारी मेरी है तो मैम डॉक्टर डायरेक्टली मुझसे क्यों नहीं बात कर रहे हैं और मेरे पेरेंट्स से क्यों बोल रहे हैं, मैम ऐसी फीलिंग्स आती है और फिर लगता है कि मतलब कुछ तो है और डॉक्टर मुझे नहीं बता रहे हैं.
If I was younger, maybe I should not listen to all of it. My parents, I would say, would have to choose which thing I would have to hear and which thing not.
What is the best way to give you information?
I like it when they use visual information and schemes or videos, which help me understand the medical procedure itself. I don't like when they just use their voice, because sometimes it's hard when they say a lot of things to remember and understand them correctly. In an ideal world, a 3D model of in this case, imagine a tumor. You could see from all the angles and you could really understand the situation. So you were less scared when you went into the procedure. So maybe that's the best way you could be handed information, but maybe it's not that realistic nowadays.
When I understand the most is when I'm actually talking to someone and know that I can say something back and that they can fill me in on more if they need to.
मैम उनको फ्रेंडली होना चाहिए क्योंकि अगर मैं एज ए लड़की हूँ या फिर गर्ल हूँ तो मैम उनको ना फ्रेंडली होना चाहिए जिस एज के अकॉर्डिंग उनके पास पेशेंट्स जा रहे हैं उस एज के अकॉर्डिंग उनको फ्रेंडली होना चाहिए उनका जो बॉडी लैंग्वेज और बात करने का तरीका वे ऑफ टॉकिंग ताकि जो सामने वाला पर्सन है वो कंफर्टेबली उनसे शेयर कर सके जो भी उसकी प्रॉब्लम है.
What is it like to ask questions?
Sometimes I hold it in because I'm scared that maybe I'll appear stupid.
The doctors know a lot more about this procedure you're going into, or the clinical study you're going to enroll in. But with the parents, they know your personality and your feelings better. So there's two kinds of questions, and you ask the doctor more about the medical stuff and the parent more about the personal stuff.
मैम थोड़ी हेजिटेशन होती है क्योंकि सामने जो इससे हम क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे हैं वो उनके पास ज्यादा इंफॉर्मेशन है और सर मैम थोड़ा ये भी लगता है कि जब उनके पास इंफॉर्मेशन है तो मेरे पास भी थोड़ा बहुत तो होना चाहिए.
Do you think that adults really listen to kids?
Sometimes say that they're listening, but they're actually doing something else and looking away and they don't understand. We kids need to recognize the difference between people who say that they're listening but actually aren't and people who say they're listening and actually are.
जब वो प्रोजेक्ट हमारे लिए काम कर रहा है तो उसमें हमारी भागीदारी होती है उसमें हमारे ओपिनियंस पूछे जाते हैं हम जो फील करते हैं हम जिस चीज से सफर करते हैं वो सारी इंफॉर्मेशन प्रोग्राम जो भी है उनके हेड वो सब लेते हैं और मैम उसमें हमारी पूरी भागीदारी होती है.
I'm in Kids Barcelona, so in my point of view, I am really being heard because I am in an advisory group. Doctors and specialists come to us even when they have questions they want us to answer. But I can understand and I can relate to other patients that are not involved in this kind of groups, that they really can feel powerless.
What is one important thing that you want adults to know?
I think it's essential for the parents to understand the information as well as the children, because the parents are the ones that know their son or daughter best, so they can afterwards explain it to the patient, to their son or daughter, and also it's necessary and really important to ask the patient how they want the information to be delivered, because I would say they are the ones that know better themselves how they will understand the information better.
We all know that adults were kids once. They were just like us. They felt the need to be loved and to be listened to. So I don't think that it's so necessary for them to learn to listen to kids, but to relearn what it's like to need to be listened to.
ऐसा एटमॉस्फेयर होना चाहिए जो बच्चे उसमें कंफर्टेबल हो, जो कोऑर्डिनेटर्स हो उनका बिहेवियर फ्रेंडली होना चाहिए बच्चों से, ताकि बच्चे उनके साथ अच्छे से कोऑर्डिनेट कर सके, वर्क कर सके और जो भी प्रोग्राम है उसमें अच्छे से पार्टिसिपेट कर सके. बिकॉज अगर एटमॉस्फेयर और जो भी प्रोग्राम का कोऑर्डिनेटर है उसका और फ्रेंडली बिहेवियर होगा तो बच्चे उसमें, हमारे जैसे बच्चे उसमें अच्छे से पार्टिसिपेट कर पाएंगे.
If you could interview a researcher or a doctor, what would you ask?
तो मतलब वो जो भी है जो भी पेशेंट है उसको कैसे फेथ दिलाएंगे कि हाँ वो जल्दी ठीक हो जाएगा या फिर उसका डर दूर हो जाए बस.
If I had a researcher in front of me, 3 specific questions that I would probably ask them. 1, do you even remember what it's like to be a kid? That would be a preface to dig a little deeper. 2, I would ask them, why am I important to your career? And once I understand and make sure that they understand how I'm important to their career, I would ask them, how can I help you do a good job helping me?
Key points. Talk directly to the child. Use visual forms of information. Create a comfortable environment. Remember what it was like to be a kid. Children are nervous about asking questions. Youth advisory groups can access the child voice. Parents are part of the information delivery process. Help children help you to do a better job.
And now we need to think of one more question that's maybe not so scary.
I don't do things that aren't scary. I don't do it. I want to look threatening.
Okay.
So every time I hear this video and the others, I am really
The
impressed.
MRCT
I really am impressed by the wisdom of these kids and how much they have to teach us and help us do a better job at what we're all trying to do. So we're going to have a panel now, which is going to be responding to what they heard. And I'm delighted to introduce our moderator, Rhian Thomas Turner from the Noah's Ark Children's Hospital in Wales, who has been part of the work that we've been doing for the last few years, and her guest speakers, Begonia Nafria Escalera from San Juan de Deo Children's Hospital, whom you've also heard about, but not from, and Angela Kialo from the KEMRI Welcome Trust Program in Kenya. She'll speak about her work, as well as Erin Moore, a patient advocate from the United States. So with that, their bios are on the website, and I want to give the panel the most time to respond and talk about this. So, yeah.
Hi, thanks, Barbara, and thanks for that introduction. And yeah, I really love being part of the work the MRCT have been doing over the last few years. I'm going to try and keep this short, really, in terms of my comments. I think the young people have probably done a much better job of saying it than I ever could, but I really just want to bring together the experiences of what we see on a daily basis. So just in terms of my background, I have spent 10 years working in child health research, but 5.5 of those have been in a patient-facing role. So we run a research unit which accommodates clinical trials, both in the commercial environment, so pharmaceutical sponsored studies, and non-commercial studies, which tend to be academic sponsored. I think over the last few years, I felt that there's probably been 3 particular areas where we really, really do need to start listening more to the young people who are participating in the clinical trials. And we really, really do need their input. And I think Megan probably does a really amazing job of inputting that if her presentations on these videos is anything to go by. So I'd say where I really feel the split is in ethics. And when I say ethics, I don't mean research ethics, what we see through IRBs or through RECs in the UK. I mean the ethics of research, where we're including children in research studies. Then secondly, how the research that children participate in is designed, and finally, the environment in which they participate in their trials. And I think all of this has already been very much touched on in the conversations earlier. So I think I'm come very much from where Jenny comes from, and I think Begonia as well, in that we kind of see this from a rights-based perspective. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child really does set a very good framework for how to involve children in research and what their rights are. And whether you come from it from a rights perspective, or the really amazing report that came out a few years ago from the Nuffield Council on Bioethics on the involvement of children in clinical research, whichever way you come at it, these are humans who are participating in trials. And I think Sophie really, really nailed it when she said that she wanted to be part of this study because it meant that they could learn more about her condition. So as I said, when I talk about research, the ethics part of this, I don't mean research ethics, the ethics that we go through in terms of when a protocol is designed. I mean the ethics of research and involving children and young people in research, and how for far too long the discussion really has been around not involving them, protecting them from research. I know that we are changing this discussion, and protection through research is definitely something that's kind of being much more focused on now. But for too long, this mantra of protecting children from research has allowed, I suppose, people to get a little bit lazy. R&D models have allowed to develop so that they're market driven rather than driven by the needs of the people who need the medication. So we end up with medication that doesn't address the needs of these children because they haven't been considered as part of the process for too long. We see that not involving them in research has caused so many issues. We've got the issues with the neonatal population who are still, we're still not seeing treatments for conditions of prematurity. And we also see it in rare cancers like DIPG, where we've not had new treatments for a long time. And we have to be honest, and we have to stand up and say the children are dying as a result of our protection of them from research. So secondly, I come on to what we see every single day on the unit is the design of research studies. And I think I've had this discussion with Erin as well. You know, we see these studies that are designed and they do very much feel like they're not designed for the children who are participating in them. And we've seen some of the children in the videos commenting on this earlier as well, about the number of blood tests that are being taken or the number of study procedures. And the number of days that maybe they need to be on site to participate in this research, the consecutive days. And this can really have an impact on their lives, the lives of children. And often we do feel like these protocols are literally, you know, somebody's clicked control and finds and replaced the word adult with child. So they're not really designed for the people who are participating, and they're really not designed with the lives of these children in mind. And I think it was Sophie that might have pointed out in her presentation, she was worried about being able to go to school while she participated in the research studies. And finally, also the environment in which children participate in research. I think it was Jan and Megan who very much pointed out in their videos about the power imbalances that they see when they're in hospital, when they're talking to doctors, where, you know, who they see have a lot of experience. And I think it's up to researchers, it's up to medics to really understand that power imbalance and to work really hard to discuss and to impart information to children and young people and their families in a way that they can fully understand and fully be comfortable in participating in studies. I've seen quite a lot of stuff on LinkedIn the last few days about Lego sending out these MRI machines to support children who might be nervous in terms of participating or having to have these procedures. But there is so much more than just a Lego MRI machine. We're talking about play therapists who spent years learning how to work with people, how to work with children, and how to really impart through play how they can participate in research and really understand what's being asked of them. And coming back again to the UNCRC, children really do have a human right to have knowledge imparted to them in a way that they can understand, and they have a right to have their parents support them, or their parents or the wider community support them in terms of understanding that information, so that they are able to make an informed decision themselves where appropriate. As Jenny mentioned, it's where these children can actually can understand this information. So, and I think that's it really for me. I really want to kind of push over to our wonderful set of panelists so that they can make a start with their opening comments, and then we will move on to kind of question and answer sessions as well. So I believe Angela is our first of the panelists this afternoon. So I'll hand over to you, Angela.
Okay, I'm Angela Chalo from Kemri Welcome Trust, Kenya. Yeah, leading the school engagement program in Kemri. So our key focus in this area in Kemri is to promote interest in science and develop understanding between researchers and communities. And I found it a very good platform where the voice of youth and adolescent children can be involved in research. in the video that we've just watched, I realized, and I also connect with our work. Like for the question that one of the children has asked was, does my opinion count, or does my opinion matter in clinical trials? And I think this is something that keeps on coming when you are engaging with children and young adults. Why are we doing this research? Why us? Does it matter that you're involved in? And I think this is well addressed. Like if the persons or the adolescents and the young children are engaged in research, their needs and their challenges and their fears and anxieties are really incorporated in the trials that are being conducted, and the outcome will really address their needs. They need to understand that the trials that are there are real issues that they interact with in a daily basis, from their homes to their schools, and in their interaction with peers. Trials are real issues. They are real problems that they face day to day. And their voice matters in that when they voice it out or when they say it out, it is incorporated in coming up with real solutions that will not only take care of their needs, but it will go beyond their personal solutions, but take care of a whole cohort or even across generations. Then looking at the different peer advisory groups that we do have, basic things that the children need to understand, or asking what is the entry point for them to get into research. An awareness is very important for the learners and for the students or even adolescents to know how do they get into it, how do they get recruited, or do they get enrolled, why do they get enrolled, and what are the key things that needs to be taken care of for them to participate. And being ages of 10 to 18 years that we work with, we realize they need to understand what voluntary participation means to them. They need to understand the accent and the consent form that they need to sign for them to participate freely, and what their rights are in terms of privacy. I think that came out very well, and transparency of information. What is the real subject that is being studied? And there are fears or dilemmas of what if it goes wrong? Are we taken care of? Are we protected if the study goes wrong? And our work as researchers or any clinical trial should be giving them assurance that different measures are being taken in place to make sure that in case there is nothing very lethal, or there is nothing so lethal for them to participate or even to be afraid of, because proper preparations are done when clinical trials are being undertaken. In the context of age and what they are doing, we also need, we look at how does it link with their normal life. These are students that are in school, they are students that are at home. In their daily living, how does clinical research or the problems that is at hand being researched, how do they relate? For me, I look at if it's a clinical trial, and we already are undertaking clinical trials within the community that we are operating. There are basic concepts in class that students learn, and we need them to realize that it is not from oblivion that they're bringing in. For example, if you're doing something about sickle cell anemia, they know the concepts of the blood cells and everything else. We have to have a way of connecting them. Then how information is best given? And I see John from Barcelona saying it's visual and it's video. I think we need to take time, or the clinical trials need to invest in material development to make materials that really talk with the learners and the students and the young people, so that it is that the message is at home, and everything that they need to learn, it's gotten firsthand from the material that they do receive from the team of the trial process. Then how do we involve them? That is one thing I looked at. I really felt like it's kind of we need to bring them on board. And in the previous presentation, we talked about creating that safe space for them and bringing up the voice and the influence that they have. So creating that safe space, going down to the environment. What does it look like? A safe space in school. What does it look like for a safe space in a hospital where the trials could be happening? And it has to be taken care of in details, looking at the cultural context that the children are, looking at the various barriers that may exist within the environment that the students are operating or the young people are operating. Then how do we reach them? And the question that the last child talked about, how can I help you to do my job? So one thing we need to bring on board is that this process, in as much as one is a patient and the other one is a researcher, it has to be very mutual, that everybody is benefiting, and this has to be very clear. In as much as the patient who is participating is getting maybe some medication, they also need to understand the information that is coming out of it will help the researcher also come up with solutions that will help a bigger population of similar issues. So yeah, how do we work together would be a very key question, and it should also be a key focus for every clinical trial, for every participant to understand, beyond me getting just assistance in terms of medication. How else is it of benefit to myself? How else is it going to be? How transparent is the researcher going to be beyond just providing some interventions to the participants? Yeah, and yeah, how do we reach them? I think I had almost talked about it. We need to look at the best language possible, the best environment possible, and the best approaches that we can reach the students, the young people, trying to bring down all the barriers that come up, like the communication, the downward communication, where the older person is talking to the younger person and expecting the young person just to take up all that kind of everything that they're talking about, but rather providing a two-way kind of a communication, providing a very ample kind of environment where everybody, both the participant and the researcher, feels comfortable to give information, and them understanding to what extent can I give what information, and how safe is that information for every one of us in the trial. Yeah, so the dilemmas, again, I would say, what if something goes wrong? I think something, it has to be very clear for every participant, young participant, that there are measures that are taken place, are put in place to ensure that they are safe. That assurance, and possibly even being mentioned beforehand for them to comfortably participate, is very key for every young person, because there's anxiety at times. There's some kind of anxiety, even in the real where we work with, that a participant will, or even a learner will ask, what if it goes wrong? What does the organization have? What does the researcher has as a plan to mitigate any risk that is imminent in participating in a trial? So being part of the communities that we work with, and as a very special group that we look at the age of 10 to 18 years, it is real that the youth need to participate through in the trials, but they need some level of awareness, proper preparation, proper handling, if I may say, to ensure that they are participating from a point of knowledge, and the benefits and also the possible risks that could be involved are very well addressed. And communication has to be very clear, two-way, so that everything is mutual, in as much as being a patient participant, it may look like they benefit more, but again, transparency requires to be said. The outcome of the results will also benefit beyond just giving an intervention to the participant. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Angela. That was great, and I really believe that what you're discussing here comes back to this kind of concept of vulnerability, that if we actually give children the right tools and really involve them, and again, this is highlighted in the Nuffield Council report, that we can kind of reverse that notion of vulnerability, because we give children the opportunity to create the environment within which they feel safe to participate. So thank you for that, and hopefully we'll address a little bit more in the questions as we go on. So next up, we have Begonia. Begonia, I'll hand over to you now to give us your opening remarks.
Thank you, Rhian. Good morning to the colleagues that they joined from the US, and good afternoon to the colleagues that joined from Europe. I have a couple of slides to present one of my teams, because I have different teams in the hospital. I will try to summarize a little bit how we are working from St. John de Déu Children's Hospital to involve children and young people. One methodology or way that we have to do it is through the YPACs, the Young Persons Advisory Groups. I need to confess that I follow the same passion that my colleague Jenny Preston. She is always an inspiration, and she was not the first person around the world to set up a Young Persons Advisory Group in 2006. And this is the Kids Barcelona YPAC that we set up in 2015. In this photo, we missed some colleagues because they weren't with us this day. Nowadays, we have 20 young members. We meet with them once per month. And in this group, we have patients and non-patients, because the healthy ones also provide high important values to the groups and to the project, because for us it's very important to work, obviously, to include the young people perspective in the clinical trials and in other innovation projects in which we work. But something that is really important, and my colleagues have mentioned, it's the children's rights, the patient rights, and the human values. And in parallel, when we involve these young people in projects, what we are building is a close relationship between them, to realize that every disease is different, and something that is very important for the clinical trials and their contribution is how we can improve the experience of the future patients that they will participate in this study. We train these young people, as Jenny mentioned time ago, with our own resources, and nowadays we work a lot during 2 years in the project that I put the link in the chat. Beyond this, if you go to the next slide, obviously there are personal stories and experiences that for us are really important. And what we try to do is to replicate this method, the same method, to work with the best methodology in each project in other formats of involving young people in projects, because in the kids groups, in the YPACs, we have kids with different conditions, and they cannot always contribute to all the projects. Obviously, we need to review a clinical trial protocol for a pediatric oncology disease. What we are doing in San Juan de Déu is to set up an ad hoc group with only patients of this disease and work together to gather their views, preferences, and expectations from the patients to be translated into the clinical trial protocol. Something that is important for us is collaboration. Pediatric clinical research in Europe means to perform the same clinical trial in different countries, and considering the value that collaboration and also the concept of diversity brings to the clinical trials world, we set up with Jenny Preston and the colleagues from the Lyon Hospital and the Aberdeen Hospital in Scotland, the YPACnet. The YPACnet is the European Young Persons Advisory Group network that has the recognition of EMPRIMA from the European Medicines Agency, and together we work with collaborative projects. Another important step that we did at the European level in terms of collaboration is the Connect for Children project. This is an IMI initiative that brings us the opportunity to work with the different national networks of clinical trials around Europe from 19 different countries in this collaborative approach to involve children, young people, and also parents, because we don't need to forget that in some projects for the age or for the condition of the children, we are not going to be able to involve directly the young people in first person. And in this case, what we do obviously is to include the view and the patient perspective from the parents. And my last point that for us it's crucial and important, it's the new environment in which we are going to work around Europe, because the last day of January, 2 days ago, the European Clinical Trials Regulation was fully implemented. And there are two important points that benefit the contribution of the patients in advisory activities. One is that when a sponsor submits the clinical trial application to the regulatory agency, the regulators, the EMA, it's asking for evidence and proof and to document if they have involved patients in the protocol design. This is really important for us because we have been working for many, many years to demonstrate the value of the patient's contribution in this very important step of the drug development. And now regulators are going to assess and consider which are the benefits to involve the patients. And a second area in which also this new regulation is relevant for us, it's in regards of the live summaries. Live summaries are mandatory in Europe in pediatric clinical trials to be submitted to the European portal that we have to manage clinical trials 6 months after the last patient last visit was performed. And in this sense, the regulation requests to do it in a PDF format with a very standard way to do it, the same like with the adult trials. And we have been working during the last 2 years to provide guidance and instructions to really create live summaries for the pediatric population, because they deserve obviously to access to these results, to understand this information, and also know it's the reward, the revenue, or the outcome that they deserve to participate in a volunteer basis in a clinical trials. Obviously, we are involved in plenty of initiatives, and I can speak a lot, but I think that the most important part of this panel is the discussion. If you want to know more about the YPACnet and the work that we are doing at the European level, please contact us, because it will be a pleasure to provide more information about our projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Begonia, and just wanted to say personal thanks over the last few years, because I've learned so much from you and Jenny in terms of what we've been doing with our research unit. And it's really exciting to hear about kind of regulators really wanted to take on board the input of children and young people in designing the study protocols, because I know that our children who do participate in these would really love to see something that is much better set up for them. So that's enough from me. Anyway, it's on to Erin now. So Erin, I'll hand over to you for you to give us your opening remarks.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me here today. My name is Erin Moore, and I have 5 children. One of them was diagnosed almost 12 years ago when he was born with cystic fibrosis. So I became a patient advocate sort of out of necessity. And I started to see the challenges that the healthcare system was presenting to us. I think that the kids in those videos are incredibly well spoken and articulated so many of the same feelings that I have and share about clinical research and kids participating in it. You know, I think that one of the challenges that we have, I was sharing a little bit with my son about why, what I was doing today and how we were going to be talking about this. And one of the reflections that I had through that was that it's only when he's being observed that he realizes he's different. The rest of the time, he's just a human. He was born with cystic fibrosis. He lives with cystic fibrosis every day. But when other people aren't noticing it, aren't calling it to his attention, aren't testing him, aren't focused on what's wrong with him, he's not, that's just who he is. It's how he lives his life. So in designing and participating in clinical research, you know, it's really been eye-opening for us to see that oftentimes, you know, the patient is blamed for failing the trial and not the trial blamed for failing the patient. When we have trouble enrolling a trial, you know, it doesn't meet with his needs. He doesn't want to be pulled out of school. He doesn't want to be observed. He doesn't want to be othered, if you will. He's a 12-year-old boy who just wants to fit into the world the way that everybody else has. I think another thing that I have observed just in my life and work in advocacy over the past 12 years now has been this notion that, you know, we do participate in advocacy groups and on panels, and we are asked often for our opinion and our advice and to participate in a panel. But what's missing is the people that aren't like us, who also need the drugs, who also need the treatments and the therapies and the experiences. They're looking for the people who have the means to participate. And so that just, in my mind, creates gaps, both in problems identified and in solutions created. So a lot of the work that I have done, I work professionally in like human systems design and innovation, specifically in co-production. How do we make sure that the people who impact and are impacted by the systems that we're trying to improve are involved in the identification and creation of solutions, so that there is some, you know, shared ownership and responsibility. What do they get out of it? We could develop the best treatment for patients living with cystic fibrosis, but if it required him to give up a part of his life and a part of his day, he's not going to take it. You know, additionally, like clinicians and researchers will often describe a medication by its very long, hard to pronounce clinical name, and patients describe it by the shape and the smell and the color and whether it makes them gag when they have to swallow it. And so I think that there's an opportunity to find some common ground between us in order to advance the development of clinical research by doing things with patients, especially pediatric patients, rather than for them. You know, I've seen it as, I've learned this as I've kind of grown up in this advocacy role as the parent of a newborn to now the parent of a 12-year-old who has his own opinions and ideas. It's important to have both. 12-year-olds can't drive themselves to clinical research appointments. They can't sign the paperwork and make the decisions, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have a voice in it. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't understand what the value of their contribution is, both for themselves and beyond that. I think that there's a real opportunity to listen to and learn from them. They are very engaged in their own disease, maybe in ways that different clinicians or researchers might want them to be, but waking up with it every day, living with whatever the condition is that they have, having to experience it in the world, they are very engaged. And so my energy is focused on finding ways to help researchers and clinicians and, you know, all different stakeholders engage with patients rather than trying to find ways to engage patients in what it is that they're doing and their priorities.
Thanks, Erin. We went to an investigator meeting a few years ago for cystic fibrosis treatment, and the whole room told the company they're not going to do it. All the doctors and nurses were like, they're not going to do it, and they just kind of completely shut us down. But the trial never got off the ground. So yeah, they're children at the end of the day. If they don't want to do it, they will tell you that they're not doing it. So anyway, so I think now we're just going to kind of move to question and answer session. We've got some questions that have been sent to us before. I don't know if Jenny and Angela are joining us in this session.
I'm here.
Hi. Great. So, okay.
Can I ask maybe Angela to come off and be back with the panel, if possible?
Myself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, so I think this is a kind of an amalgamation of a few questions that have really been asked, and I think it kind of relates to a lot of what Erin's been saying and some of what Angela was saying as well. But this kind of closing the loop of what are children kind of getting out of participating in trials? When do they get to know the outcome of the trials? And I think it was Sophie mentioned how well it was done. So really kind of your experiences of this situation, what you think could be done better. I don't know if we want to start with Erin, and if you can just kind of expand a little bit more on what your comments were earlier around what your son feels about kind of this participation and really understanding. And I think Angela had something very similar that she said around the why as well. So could we start with you, Erin? Is that okay?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Again, this is something that has changed as he has grown up. What he has gotten out of it in the past when he was 7 and 8 and 9 years old was a gift card, right? Like quite literally, like that's what would entice him to participate. He knew he could go to the gift shop and purchase something. And now he's starting to understand a little better that his participation means something beyond himself. And so even if he might not see direct benefit from a treatment or medication, he now knows and understands and like can physically feel the difference and the change in his body when he's taking certain medications or doing different therapies that he might have to do, and can see and articulate and can articulate the experience of that change, of that relief, and wants to provide that to somebody else. I think the other thing for him is really starting to see that it's not just staying in the trial, it's coming back and doing another one, right? So the whole experience of the trial is a part of this. It's trial retention, and then it's, repeat engagement in the trial. There's not going to be just one, there may be several, especially if you're living with a lifelong chronic illness. When he can see and understand that, this series of MRIs in addition to this medication that you have to take will really help us to understand how we can start to minimize your involvement in some of these things. One quick example, he just started a new therapy for people living with cystic fibrosis about 2 years ago. And it's what we've been waiting for. It's the most transformational drug that has ever existed for any disease population. Truly, truly life-changing, remarkable medication. And it's what we've been fundraising for 12 years. And it's what we've been in trials for. And it's what we've advocated and talked about and elevated that would make him better. And when he finally got it, he said, it's just another pill I have to take, because nothing else changed for him. Now, 2 years in, he knows that he's in the hospital less often. He has to do his treatments less. But right out of the gate, it was just more that he had to do. There was no plan or consideration for what that experience of taking this medication might look like for him. For me, like 1,000 pounds of bricks were lifted off my shoulder. I knew that he was going to be okay on this medication, but for him, it was additive. It was something else that he had to participate in. So I think even those intersections, those small intersections, what can we offer to them? What can we offer to kids at those moments, those critical moments where something new is happening, so that they can see and experience a positive change, a positive impact that you might not always see or feel or, observe the immediate effects of, because we never understood what his priorities were. His priorities were for this disease to be less disruptive to his life. He doesn't want to be othered. He doesn't want to be observed. And now everybody is gathered around watching him take yet another pill. So I think all of those things are considerations to help understand what he gets out of it, what he would get out of participation.
So it's understanding, I suppose, and managing expectations. And I wonder, Angela, when you've been working with your young people, around education and understanding clinical research, that kind of stuff, is there anything, that they've added around kind of how we better allow children to understand the clinical research process?
Yeah, I think in most cases, because we work with these with the students and the young people in groups, there is a lot of curiosity questions And because where we are already, real research trials are ongoing, and in most cases they work with the community research groups, and they are really involved as young people. So they will ask questions like, can I participate in this kind of a research? What does it take for me to participate? And in most of the researchers at times when they go to the communities, they don't come to the schools. So one thing we realize is like giving a very candid information that this is the trial, it needs this kind of cohort, the age group. So you qualify or you don't qualify to participate. And then the real questions again, when we're with them, they will ask us, why are we involved in this one as young people? Yet the problem at hand at times is not as huge as where we are like elsewhere, because I think they understand there are some trials that are being undertaken where they are, but the problem may not be huge. So we've had questions like, what do you know about the numbers here where we are vis-a-vis elsewhere that you must do a clinical research with us? And then what are some of the problems that we may face as we participate as young people in this research? And what kind of measures have you put in place to ensure that there is no problem that we may have to face, and if there is a problem, it can be managed. So there are real fears among the youth in participating, and these are some of the dilemmas and some of the things that we really need to, we feel we need to talk to them candidly and tell them there are really structures within the organization and the researchers that are followed. And at one point we said we need to prepare them all the way to a point where they can even review a protocol, because for the ages that we have they can even review a protocol. That's why we are working with them in YPACs. We take them through the ethical research and the principles of research. We engage with some case studies with them, so that they can identify some of the malpractices that have been experienced and that have necessitated some institutions to be in place to make sure that the ethical considerations are taken care of and the dignity of a person is very well taken care of, and they are not exposed to risk by just participating to research, but they are there with a lot of mitigation to ensure that the outcome of the research is far much felt beyond their personal. And for them, it's like contributing to growth in the medical research. And we relate this with real issues. Like when you talk about vaccines and you have to link them to what they know. They've gone through measles vaccines, they've gone through smallpox vaccines, and the current vaccines around COVID. So we say people were engaged in this kind of research. Real people were engaged in this kind of research, and that's why when you get that jabs, we are having fewer cases of smallpox, we have fewer cases of measles. Yeah, and that kind of a conversation demystifies research. It demystifies the process, and they are more comfortable actually. At one point, they will even ask you, when can we participate in this kind of a research? Because they are comfortable relating, and the issues, they understand the issues that are being tested in research. There are real issues that they're in their households. There are real issues that their peers are going through. They can even tell you, we know of some issues that needs to be looked into. And at one point, they can even bring out questions that can initiate research at one point, because they were asking, can we even bring a question that can be researched? So that kind of level of awareness and making the young people comfortable, actually, it brings a very good working relationship, because anytime you want to work with them, there is no resistance. Initially, there has been a lot of resistance and a lot of myths around what the kind of researches that are happening, especially when it comes to researchers having to get some samples of blood, or even having to get some kind of items to share. So working on those myths and misinformation, I think it makes the youth more receptive and more positive, and with a longer kind of an objective they set for themselves, having even interest to at one point become researchers in the area of health science. So yeah, it's quite a process. We are in baby phases, but there's a lot of learnings that are coming through, and especially listening to the youth candidly talking about their fears, their concerns, and their interests and their needs. I think that is very, very helpful.
Yeah, Sorry, I agree. We spoke to a young person at a conference last year, specifically looking at COVID-19 vaccines, and well, two young people who were involved, both of them had the same concerns and issues around misinformation, and they just wanted to be able to trust what was being told to them. They wanted to know that if they were putting something into their body, that it was safe and it was necessary. Sorry, Begonia, you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in and bring something, say something here?
Yeah, thank you, Rian. It's only to bring the experience that we have from St. John the Little Children's Hospital about this discussion, because for us it's very important, the information process and the decision-making process with the young patients, because in Spain, if you have 12 years or you are older, it's mandatory to be involved in the assent, and you need to agree with your parents to take part in a clinical trial. What we have seen is that the resources and the information, and also the documents of the consent coming from different clinical trials provide different information. And at the end, no, this is the basis that our principal investigators, they use to inform the patients. And in this sense, and this is a project that we have managed with our Young Persons Advisory Group, we have created a welcome kit. This is the internal name in our hospital, to ensure that all the patients, even if they are participating in different clinical trials, they receive the minimum basis of information that we consider in terms of all the concepts that you need to know about the clinical trial design protocol, all your rights, all your commitments. And also this welcome kit has specific resources for the patients to make more friendly the experience. For example, for the most youngest ones, we have like a passport that anytime that they came to the hospital, we put a stamp about if today we have performed to you a blood test or whatever the medical procedure. And we have something similar at the end of the process. The internal name of this resource is the bye-bye kit, because for us it's very important to finalize and to close the experience explaining what is going on after, because at the very beginning we need to clarify that a clinical trial, it's not a treatment. Still we are doing research and we need to see if this treatment is going to be approved. But when the clinical trial finalizes, also it's important information about what is going on, if you can continue or not receiving this drug. And for us, this is something that it's very, very important. And my last point regarding the end of the loop of the research process is how we get back to the patients with the results, because they deserve, and it's a right. And here, when we consulted the different European WIPACs, what we saw is that beyond what states the regulation, that it's a PDF that you can print and that's it, and in English and optionally in the other languages of the countries that were involved, they requested other things because they are digital natives people. They request digital or multimedia resources, and something that is very important, they request to include in the slide summaries the outcomes of the secondary endpoint, because in some cases they are more worried about anything related to their quality of life than the first endpoint, that basically it's a very scientific output. This is an example, about what you can do and how you can impact and improve the experience of the real patients in clinical trials.
Excellent. Thank you, Begonia. I think we've got a few more minutes left for questions now. So we've kind of dealt with information, and we know that kind of how information is imparted is really important to children and young people, because we've heard it time and time again. But I really want to kind of move into the area of diversity now as well, and maybe Jenny and Begonia, we can come to you first on these. In terms of your WIPAC groups, the diversity of children who are able to participate in these groups, do you find that there's a wide range of children who participate, or do we have children from certain socioeconomic backgrounds who are more comfortable kind of in getting involved in these groups? Jenny, are you okay to start? Is that okay?
Can I just say that the Young Persons Advisory Group is just one model to involve young people? I think I mentioned it in the talk that it will attract a particular type of young person if there's an expectation that the young person has to come to you to join regular monthly meetings, for example. So we've found that you will tend to attract, obviously, those with, conditions who might have found out about the WIPAC through their hospital or through their doctor. or through the fact that they want to become our future doctors, which isn't a problem, but that excludes those from socially economic backgrounds or ethnically diverse groups of young people who most of the time are excluded from these type of opportunities. So I think I mentioned that it's really important that you build in a strategy to do and build in outreach work for when you want to participate with a diverse group of young people. So we don't do just the young people's advisory group meetings. We go out into communities and do a lot of work with our community groups and youth groups. And I'll give you an example. So we were looking at a project about how to teach young people about antibiotic resistance. So it's quite a complex, topic. And I engaged with a drama group who was in a socially, economically deprived area of Liverpool to create a drama, a play that would be played out in front of primary school age children. Now that's quite difficult, trying to get young people to write a play, to understand the concepts, to understand the science, and actually perform it in front of their peers and young people who, can be quite difficult and can be quite a difficult audience to engage with. So, credit to the young people, they took that challenge on board, but actually it engaged with over 400 to 500 primary school children in a way that they could understand and that they could, take away the key messages about antibiotic resistance. So there are means and ways of doing and outreach, going out to, communities and doing that diverse, inclusion. But actually it takes a lot of resource, time, effort from the whole research teams to do that. So it's just something to bear in mind that the YPAG model is just one model of involving young people.
Thanks, Jenny. I'd love to have seen that. It must have been great.
Actually, I'll be sharing soon. So the play was recorded in a video, but it was also performed live. But we're now turning that into a, I think it's a 2.5-minute cartoon, an animation that's been designed by the young people, but the key messages are still there that the young people had originally wrote. So I'll share that with you all in the coming weeks, because that's just about to be published.
Begonia, I think we've just got just about enough time to hear from you as well, whether or not your experiences are similar with regards to diversity of involvement of children.
Yes, we work in a similar direction than Jenny, and in common projects. And as an example, for example, I can talk about the Connect for Children project, that here we have a very early dialogue with the sponsors that they came to us. And we try to figure out which are the criteria of the real patients that at the end will take part in this clinical trial, if there is a gender balance or not, the countries, the diversity of the disease, because in some studies, it depends. We can include more than one diagnosis, because some diseases also can have a very heterogeneous spectrum of the disease. With this very important scientific information about the disease, we work with the patient involvement plan for this trial. It's very important for us to work with the patients organizations across Europe and the national networks that I mentioned. We have 19 across Europe, and to try to recruit these patients. And something that is crucial for the concept of the diversity, it's the methodology, because in some cases, and it depends of the area in which you involve the patients, imagine that there is an activity in which we need to explore, which is the patient journey, the disease burden, that medical needs. Probably it depends on the family or the young patient. They prefer to have a one-to-one interview instead of a panel discussion. And in this sense, something that we do is to advise and design the best methodology to include this diversity concept. And something that it's now working around Europe, it's simulation. In some projects, it's not a matter to have a dialogue with individual patients, parents, or group discussions. In some initiatives, it's important to test things before to implement the clinical trial in real work. And here, what we try to do, it's not only to do a simulation only with one patient or one family, at least a couple, and have patients as an observers to realize which are the points that probably deserve to be improved because sometimes this, if are hard points, it means that you need to amend the protocol if it's finished, but it depends of the phase in which you are. It means that you can shape this protocol, and as I said, not to work always towards the better experience for the real patients. I think that at least from my experience, and Jenny has more experience than me and can confirm, every project is different, and we don't have a standard goal to say, okay, if you need to review a protocol, this is the best methodology. We need to take into account the diversity that underlies the disease.
Amazing. Thank you, Begonia, and thank you so much to Erin, to Angela, to Begonia, and to Jenny for these questions. I'm going to hand back to Barbara now.
Unbelievably. Thank you. And thank you all. This is an unbelievably informative session and really starts to let us appreciate how much work we have to do, how much we need to make sure that we stay interconnected and address and continue to address those aspects of not only the practical, ethical, and operational issues, but also the issues of inclusion and figuring out how we can hear and how we can sort of feed back the information in a way that is useful. And that goes for, you know, children, adolescents, younger children, and certainly their parents and caregivers, who often can tell us, you know, much better than anyone what we're getting right and what we're missing, because every kid is somewhat different, and we need to be open to hearing those lessons. So thank you so much to the panel. I want to and to Jenny, to Sophie, please extend our thanks to the planning committee who brought this, and I want to close with a few closing remarks. If we could go back to the slides. So thank you so much to everyone. And I have to say the synthesis of what we've been hearing over the last number of years that we've been doing this work in collaboration with ICANN, with the YPAGs around the world, is this information is not generally available in a way that can be found easily, that can be delivered and can be adopted, adapted, and used by many. So we started some time ago developing age-appropriate materials for young people considering participation in clinical trials. And just as Begonia was mentioning, this is not specific to a given clinical trial, but rather to the sort of issues around participating at all. And all of the work that we've done in this, we're sort of developing a suite of what we're calling educational materials for kids aged 12 to 17. We're adjusting that to a younger age group as well, to address that gap in accessible general information about clinical research. These currently flat brochures, but we'll talk about what will be coming, were developed by young people, actually a high school student initially, and then with a number of people, then went through a process of being reviewed by advisory groups and international stakeholders. And I have to say, the input from international stakeholders and from other YPAGs was really critical. ICANN was tremendous in helping us develop those connections and accessing the voices of people around the world. The way we use language is different. The way that we work with children in clinical trials is different, and we needed to be really thoughtful about how how we allowed for those differences to be considered and elevated the patient sort of experience in that. Could I have the next slide? So we have now made a set of brochures. What is clinical research? What is assent? What happens at the end of the study? And what happens when you turn to the age of consent. In the US, it's either 18 or 19, depending on the state, but it does differ around the world. So it's age neutral. Each of those are now posted on our website, which is MRCT Center /kids, because it's for kids. And if you go back one, please, the ones that are in development are sharing your information, data, and research, so that really people understood what happens to their data and what they can ask about data. What is a focus group and why should I join one? Sort of thinking through in advance of getting into the room, what information you're going to share or not share, and the sort of importance of being honest, but also the importance of feeling empowered to say, I don't want to answer that question, or I don't want to say anything on that. And then what happens to sensitive information in research, who can see it, et cetera. So if you go to the next slide, that is the sort of current view of the ones that are available. And as I said, we'll be continuing to populate this site. Could I have the next slide? We've also done work with the Boston Children's Hospital and the Harvard Clinical and Translational Science Award or Science Center to develop a cartoon, Sophie's Science Project. It wasn't named after Sophie, but I can see how that resonates now. That we have now modified to be a live video. So in sort of appreciating that, while I grew up on comic books, others are growing up in videos. And could you show the next? And then we've developed a similar one on the next slide. Next click. On biobanking questions and answers, so that people really can, and kids can understand what happens in a biobank, what happens to the sample, who uses the sample, what happens when their blood tissue and information is stored. Could I have the next slide? What we did find in doing this work and in preparing for this talk and this series of discussions is that even in engaging the kids who are going to be part of the video, part of the conference themselves, and tonight we'll hear directly from someone, there was very little available in terms of an assent and a consent for participation in research, but not as a participant in research, but rather as an engaged youth advisor or youth consultant or outside of the research project itself. So what we did was Lisa Koppelman took the initiative of developing a consent form and assent form for non-research activities to really think about the preparation and understanding, the right to review materials before and after, so that the kids particularly, are comfortable with what they've presented, the privacy and security considerations, the transitions before and after engagement, so that we've thought about it both before, during, and after. I can tell you that in one episode that we had, as soon as the child was going to be part of a panel, she started receiving automatic notations or notes and emails from the planning group to post her picture, bio information, last name, and contact information on the web. That kind of thing we need to think through in advance. There's no reason why people can't have their voice heard, but still maintain degrees of privacy. We've also developed some specific content, such as, how to initiate that conversation, their parents and caregivers, understanding how the youth engagement can be really present throughout the product life cycle, and considerations to a decision about youth engagement. You'll see the next slide that we're in the process of developing this, and we'll make it public as soon as it's been sort of finalized, but there are instructions, there's a consent, and then assent, which really walks people through this. So could I have the next slide? So as we're going through this, let me say that anything we are sharing on the website, feel free to use, disseminate. What we do ask is that you let us know if you translate the materials, to please work with us. We'd like to make sure that the translated materials remain age appropriate. Often when we do a direct translation, the grade level actually rises, and allow us to repost it so that others need not expend resources replicating the effort involved. Also, please let us know if you have additional suggestions for additional materials. We'd love to continue this work in collaboration with you all. Could I have the next slide? And finally, the webinar recording and slides will be posted in approximately 1 week. The YouTube will host the youth videos, and we look forward to hearing from you. Please sign up for future webinars. And could I have the last slide? Thank you so much to the speakers, participants, and particularly the young people who shared their stories and taught us so much today in their videos and in the work that we've all been doing. I never stop learning. To Gigi McMillan, who produced the second video you saw, Time to Listen, and to ICANN, specifically Amy Omer, Leanne West, and their colleagues, Claire, who produced, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, a producer and producing prioritizing young people's voices in clinical research. And they have already begun to finalize the videos for the next 2 sessions that we'll be hosting. And specifically, all the youth who shared their time, expertise, and stories with us from ICANN and Kids Barcelona. With that, let me thank you all. This is such a wonderful day today, and I really appreciate your participation and engagement, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.